Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of Talking Tech, Women and Girls in ICT. My name is Gennaro, and I am the Cyber and Digital Fellow at Columbia University's SEPA Tech and Policy Initiative. And I'm excited to be having this conversation today about tech and tech careers with Carol Anderson, the Assistant Vice President and Senior Legal Counsel at AT&T External and Regulatory Affairs. The Talking Tech is a series celebrating girls and women in tech that is being recorded around the world between Girls in ICT Day 2020 and Girls in ICT Day 2021. Girls in ICT Day is an international day marked on the fourth Thursday of each April. In 2020, Girls in ICT Day was April 23rd. The objective of Girls in ICT Day is to help create a global environment that empowers and encourages girls and young women to consider studies and careers in growing fields in information and communications technology. This Talking Tech series was brought to you today by the ITU, UNICC, and the Office of the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, and is in support of Equals, the Global Partnership for Gender Equality in the Digital Age. We're pleased to be a partner of today's session, and the goals of this series include to interest and inspire girls and younger women with information about a range of ICT careers that are available, to bring before a broader audience some of the role models of women in tech and share information about their career journeys and work, and to offer diverse examples of how ICT is being used to support achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and other UN goals. To showcase the initiatives around the world that are working with girls to support them in ICT studies or future ICT careers, and to provide girls and young women in tech with a leadership opportunity to represent and promote girls in tech organizations with which they are involved, and to promote a broader international audience, and to promote that to a broader international audience. So to kick off this session, I'm now going to kick it over to Carol and start with our discussion.
Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the introduction, Jen, and thanks to everyone with the Girls in Tech program for including me in this delightful conversation. So as Jen mentioned, I'm an Assistant Vice President and Senior Legal Counsel with AT&T in the External and Regulatory Affairs group. I work on regulatory and legislative issues across the Western United States, as well as some broadband and social issues on a national basis. I've been with AT&T for about 21 years, which is unbelievable when I think about it. And when I started at the company, we were just getting into long distance. The plain old telephone service, or POTS, or landline as you might know it, was really a competitive area in the landscape. And getting into long distance and then DSL, or digital subscriber lines, which were sort of the replacement for dial-up internet, was the technology that we were really working on when I started with the company. Obviously, the regulatory and the technology landscape doesn't look anything like that today. As we talk about cybersecurity issues, we talk about 5G and what that means, and small cells and spectrum, and all these other different issues that we have come to the forefront of the regulatory and technology industry as smartphones and software and digital applications have fundamentally transformed our lives. So it's been a wild ride for the last 21 years. It's been continuous learning, and it's been a really great opportunity. Now, I know that Jen, when you and I have talked, we've found that we have a real aligned interest in both the sort of policies behind technologies, because we're at a little bit of an inflection point, I think, as we look at that, as well as the importance of cybersecurity, not just for networks, for companies like AT&T, but for all of us on an individual basis. And so I wanted to kind of turn the introduction over to you, Jen, to talk about how it is that you got interested in your Cyber and Digital Fellow program and your interest in cybersecurity policy.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, I've really enjoyed our discussions and being able to connect through this ITU program. So I currently work at the Columbia University School of International Public Affairs, where I've been supporting their technology and policy initiative and their cybersecurity program. And, I also got my master's through the school, and actually, I've had this really rare opportunity to be able to work somewhere that I got to learn from and enjoy so much when I was a student myself. And so what really brought me there, or what brought me to where I am now today, and these points, I was definitely a career changer. I've always been interested, I think, in policy. When I originally started my master's, I thought that I would be pursuing something, I think, more in the public urban policy space. And just, I think I've always had a fascination with technology, love the sci-fi, love the female hacker engineer characters that honestly there weren't a lot of when I was a student or younger, but I think I'm seeing a lot more now. And so, I never really had an outlet for that. It never was something that I thought I could really do. And so I went into college kind of thinking, going to do a whole bunch of other things, pre-med, then public health, then, down the career road. One of the things, started the first jobs and none of it was in the tech space, but something that I always realized about myself, I was always reading about, tech innovation in the news and social media movements and just all these things that I like to write about for some of my courses and whatnot. Just, it was so interesting to me. And so, when I was in grad school, was right around the time that everyone started talking about, the 2016 elections and Russian intervention and disinformation, misinformation campaigns. And so it really got me interested in, technology it's an amazing, it's an amazing tool. It's something that can change the world, but we have so many, there are so many negative externalities, I think, to it that have really, it's, if we want to make sure that we can continue to use it and use it in a safe way, in a secure way, we really need to start thinking around that. So that's I think what really brought me to where I am now, and kind of the launch of where I want to go eventually work on stuff in the future.
That's, and I think one of the interesting things about what you were saying there, Jen, is how, as technology has emerged, some of the concerns around its uses and how it is used have changed. And I think it's such a great opportunity for you that you're at the point of sort of finishing your program, that this is clearly at the forefront of policymakers and regulators, as you look around the world. And so this such a great time to be at that intersection of regulatory and policymaking, and around this concern. So it's interesting how your sort of side passions have driven your professional career. I think what's interesting is, when I started, first, I love that you were talking about how you finished graduate school around 2016. When I finished graduate school, I was listening to the Senate Judiciary Committee interview Anita Hill in anticipation of Clarence Thomas' Senate confirmation hearing. So a little bit of time has passed between when I finished graduate school and you did. But I think part of what I found interesting there in what you were saying too is, you started kind of down one path in your education and have really gone a very different direction. And when I was studying at the university level, I was a history major. I really enjoyed math and science when I was in high school, but when I got to college, what I just was really interested in was learning more about history, learning more about the people and the cultures, and what sort of drove a lot of the global impacts, to where we are today. And when I went to law school, I thought I was going to be a trial lawyer all of the time. My dad was a trial lawyer. That was the only kind of law that I knew that made any sense. And I honestly thought this sort of transactional work or technology work, like, what could be more dull? And when I went in-house at Pacific Bell, which was then Pacific Bell at the time, and started to have an opportunity to work on different types of litigation that weren't just about who's going to win in court, but understanding issues around the network, understanding issues around intellectual property, understanding issues around technology, I got more and more interested in the business side of the business. And so one of the great things about having been in-house for as long as I have is that they have really made opportunities for us to learn about the business. And so I've gone from being, I want to be in court all the time, to really wanting to be sitting down with my technology partners, with my regulatory partners, to understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and then using that sort of educational framework that you have as being a lawyer to identify what are the issues that we have with this, how do we need to explain this to our lawmakers, how do we need to explain this to our business partners so that we can bring new technologies and new services out into the industry. So it's funny. I mean, it's you know, your arc has been a little shorter, but the same sort of transformational piece where you go down a road and you realize that you've got these interests.
Well, I think that's the beauty of the ICT industry, and you know, it's something that I mentioned a lot when we kind of had our discussions. You know, within the tech space, there's definitely a broad range of I think opportunity for people, and you know, if you're like me, there's all these ways to engage, I think, and that's one of the nice things about it. And you know, so you know, right now, because I'm in a more academic setting, you know, for me, what I've been helping to do is kind of help organize, you know, the conferences or some of these closed workshops discussions that we have, or you know, assist with the research where we're talking a lot about these things. You know, but one of the things that we've started thinking about it is more creative or alternative routes. You know, of how we can engage further discussion, or just, you know, one of the things that I've also done a lot is thinking about, you know, how do we make sure that we're bringing in opportunities for our more recent grads. And so, you know, I love, as you're talking about what you've gotten to do, it's definitely the trajectory that I hope to, after my current thing is finishing up, you know, kind of go into, and you know, can jump from academia into the more either policy or risk space. And so I think that's you know, I love hearing about what it is that you're doing, and it gives me an idea of, you know, what it is that I could be doing in you know, in the future. And so, you know, one thing that I'm actually kind of curious about, you know, when you're talking about tech, and sort of how you got into the space, why did you stick to it?
So Jen, you know, as I mentioned, you know, I did not start my career thinking I was going to be in the technology field or that I was going to be a technology lawyer. I was going to be a trial lawyer. The early on in my career, I had an opportunity to work on a case with a lawyer who was then in-house at Pacific Bell. And it was this fascinating case where someone had claimed that a lightning bolt struck a utility cover, carried the lightning through the copper wires, and that the electricity surge went through a telephone and then through a headset and shocked the person. There was a lot of space there, I think, for the electrical current to maybe have lost its charge. But it was a very interesting case because up until that point, I hadn't really thought about a lot of the sort of legal aspects or technical aspects around how these things might occur. And it's so, you know, learned more about the industry from that case and became very interested in kind of redirecting my career to kind of be in a more in-house environment where you had an opportunity to really kind of get to know the business, as I mentioned. Along the way, what has been so exciting, and I don't want to repeat myself, is just that the opportunity to always learn about a new technology and to always have a new experience. So, you know, some of the amazing things that I've had an opportunity to work on include, you know, just taking orders like the 2015 net neutrality order and working with our business services to make sure that we were really in compliance with everything that the FCC had expected from a technical standpoint in terms of delivering of broadband services. And another area where I've really had a great opportunity is to just work on some of the incredible mergers that AT&T has done to sort of transform itself from a traditional kind of telecommunications company to a modern media and entertainment company that, you know, brings us feature films with Wonder Woman, who has always been my hero, and I'm very proud to be associated with that. So, you know, it's been great, you know, because there's just, honestly, there's never a dull moment. And I think that you, like me, is, you know, you've got your career focus, but you've also got your just intellectual curiosity. And when you work in the technology industry, that intellectual curiosity is always piqued. But I think that the other thing, if I think just to kind of shift shift gears a little bit. The other thing that I have really enjoyed about this career is that it just highlights for me that you can have a plan, but you always need to be open to having a different plan. Because if
Mhm.
you only look in one direction, you may miss opportunities that might be better suited for, or better suited for your skill set. They might be better, you might be more interested in something that you don't know about. And so, while as important as it is for all of our the girls in tech that might be listening here, I think one piece of advice I would want to share is definitely have a plan, have an idea of what you want to do, but don't be afraid to depart from that plan either. Leave those doors open and leave those options open. And that sounds like something that you've really had an opportunity to do and has given you some opportunities to try some different things. I know when we were talking um,
Mhm.
about how you got interested in this, you shared a really interesting story with me about your experience with homeless services. And I was wondering if you would just want to talk about that at all.
Yeah. And so this was so one of the things I did before grad school, before my current thing, I did an AmeriCorps program where I was based at the Department of Homeless Services. And we were doing this really amazing pilot where we were trying to develop these linkages between, shelters and Department of Education. And so, we were trying to work to help, connect these two to help bring more wraparound services, facilitate greater partnership. And one of the things we were doing was this huge conference at the end of the year where we were going to, almost like a graduation ceremony, try and get as many students that had, applied and gotten into college and were enrolling to attend this ceremony. And as a gift, we were going to be handing out these laptops that had been donated. And, we on one occasion we ended up having to go to one of the shelters because we were trying to identify almost like a valedictorian to talk.
Mhm.
And as we're there, I remembered kind of thinking to myself, like, it just sort of came up organically in conversations we were talking that, and I guess I knew this in the back of my mind the entire time, but there were there's no Wi-Fi in shelters. I remember thinking to myself, so we're giving people these laptops, these students these laptops to help them with school. And many of these students are probably enrolled in city universities and will probably still be living in shelter when they go off to college. And yet they don't have the actual connection resource. Like, they're not going to be able to study in their rooms. And so, I think that was one of the first times that, things like the digital divide and access issues really hit me. And so that was part of what, when I started my graduate program, I was thinking that was, I think, part of the initial like shift towards like, yes, this is the space I want to veer into. Like, I want to look at, for me, tech, even my cybersecurity focus and interest has always been people-centered.
Jen, your conversation there about access to Wi-Fi and the digital divide, I think, the last 12 months have highlighted so many things for so many people. But one of those is that broadband is an essential service to connect students and families and workers, and to ensure that we all remain in contact with one another and with our essential functions when, that in this very crazy time that has been 2020 and into 2021. And I think it's really important to recognize that technology is essential for individuals, that it's not just, we're not just talking about um, as important as artificial intelligence and big data and all of the topics that are really so fascinating and interesting, that there really is a consumer and individual
Mm-hmm.
element to technology, and that's so important. And I think one of the, in some ways, as we look at Biden's agenda and the focus on broadband and connectivities in schools and families, that we really do that revelation that you had as a much younger person, right, working with the homeless shelters on the essential nature of connectivity, is something that is really getting national and global recognition. And I think that you see a lot of companies investing in right now, and that's exciting.
Sure. I also think, to add on that, also because, the side interest in the cybersecurity there, I think what we've also seen, you see a rise in the ransomware attacks, and you see a rise. I mean, additionally, I remember reading something recently about how there's definitely a correlation between, remote work and more cyber attacks on companies. And so, and we definitely are seeing a rise in ransomware attacks. And so it is kind of a reminder, and I'm glad to see the current Biden administration seems to be taking cybersecurity seriously. But the two do go hand in hand, and there is definitely the consumer component, where we're impacted not just by the access issues and the connectivity issues, but also there's the security implications have a people component too.
Absolutely.
And so, kind of to segue this back to to careers and
oh right, right. That's why we were here.
Yeah, I know. We basically could just nerd out on policy all day, but that's not why they asked.
No, it's not. But good to, always good to find a kindred spirit.
Yeah, and so I guess maybe shifting a little bit as we've talked about our focus and our interests, and what you've been doing, and the cool things you've been doing in the last few years, the stuff that interests me and that I'd like to go towards. Maybe let's shift more towards. What are some of the advice that we might give girls or young women that are either at the cusp or just starting, or maybe early on, lessons learned from yourself. Maybe let's start there. If you want to start with some lessons learned from your experience, or from people that you've worked with or observed, maybe focusing in on your experience as being a woman in the workforce, or doesn't necessarily have to be that, but just any advice that you can give.
So I think that there's so much to unpack there, and we have a limited amount of time. But I think some of the things, Jen, that you and I have talked about when we think about sort of our careers and positioning ourselves is, even though being a lawyer isn't a traditional technology role, and I didn't see myself necessarily as a technology specialist when I started my career, I think the reality is that today almost every industry has a technology, STEM, digital component. And so businesses that you would never even think of having a digital profile, everybody has a digital profile right now. So I would say to aspiring women in the STEM field that there is an abundance of opportunity in so many different roles, because technology touches not only every aspect of our lives, but it touches every business and government institution that's out there as well. So there's I think sort of limitless opportunity. And as you're looking to figure out sort of where it is you want to go, it gets to part of what you and I are doing here today, which is networking. It is incredibly important to have a network, to build that network, and to maintain that network. But it also needs to be an authentic network. It's not going to a SEPA conference, or a meeting and collecting as many business cards as you possibly can. It's having 2 or 3 conversations with someone that you may want to have a follow-up conversation with, because your connections recognize your authenticity. And it's that authentic connection. It's the ability to have a connection, to reach back out, and to not just reach out when you want something, but to be there for someone. And so one of the things that I've really enjoyed in my career and about this conversation is not just having mentors, but being a mentor, to be there, to be someone that can share advice, offer suggestions. And I don't think that has an age limit. I don't think it has to be because I'm older than you that I can be your mentor. I think you have things to teach me too. And so I think as people are thinking about their careers and their networking, it's not just go find a sponsor, go find a mentor, but be that person too for your peer group, for your colleagues. Because I think as we build this community, and I think that women are good at building a community, I think that as we build this community, all of our connections get stronger and all of our opportunities get greater. So that's sort of some of the perspective that I've developed over my career. And I'll say that when I started, I think there was there was often room for one woman to be in a senior position. And thankfully over the last 20 years, that's not the case, right? There are multiple opportunities, and I think that the future, as we look at a lot of the gender equity focus of different political agendas, that's going to change even further. So those are some of my observations, Jen. But I'd be interested, because I know you have been out of the undergraduate world for a while, and you've had an opportunity to kind of get your own view. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I absolutely love kind of what you've mentioned. I think those are all definitely some guiding thoughts that I've had in my head. And so I think more than anything, I'm probably going to end up echoing some of what you've said and maybe just emphasizing it. Something you mentioned earlier was that definitely that I think something that's important in tech, and you mentioned this earlier, was the curiosity. And I think that's really important, because this really is a field where it changes. It's so dynamic. There's, whether you're on the tech side or even the policy and the legal side that are trying to keep up with it, it's constantly changing. And so I will say that in a way, this can be a difficult industry to get into. And so it does require you to do kind of your homework on some of those issues, stay on top of them. You want to sound smart in a room, and you've done the reading. Something that actually you told me that is always on the back of my mind, but I loved hearing you mention it to me the other day and emphasize it. When you have the opportunity to go in a meeting or meet someone and talk about things, making sure that you have those kind of clear kind of points that you want to bring up. I think it's definitely going to go a long way. Same thing with sort of if you're starting your career or networking in undergrad or grad school, having your sort of elevator pitch.
Absolutely.
Going back, yeah, it's definitely necessary. And going back to what you'd mentioned before on networking, I think I cannot stress enough how pivotal that is. And I know it definitely does not come easy to me. But I think you definitely need to find those opportunities for meaningful connections. I think sometimes those are easier to find when you're still a student. And so something like this ITU Tech Talk, this is how I met Carol. And so finding things like that's one way, if you do better with a one-on-one than a major conference. And really stressing the mentor kind of perspective of just, at every stage in life, you're going to need people that are going to help open doors for you, or at least kind of point you in the direction of an open door. And so, if you're still in college, that's going to be your professors or your mentors that write you letters of recommendations for college. And then, as you progress, that ends up being the people that will help maybe get your foot in the door in an organization or help you get an interview. And, keeping in touch, I've learned, I think as I've gotten older and gone through mentors throughout my life, I some I've been better at keeping in touch with, and others I haven't been as good. And so that's definitely something that I'm constantly trying to improve. But there's nothing better than when you're reaching out to one of these, to one of the people that at some point or another, gave you so much invaluable experience, when you're not being successful at something and you reach out and you're just having a conversation, and just organically, they might say something that just really enforces or reminds you, like, hey, to someone in this world, they thought I had potential. And that's a great feeling, when you can have that conversation with someone and just be reminded of that. And so,
oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the external validation and reminder is always great. But Jen, I know this is something else that you and I had talked about. You're also always going to be your own best advocate. And as important as networking and as important as mentors and sponsors are, as you look to establish your career, you have to be your own best advocate, because no one is more committed to your success than you are.
100%.
And so remind yourself of the things that you've accomplished. I've had an opportunity to look at your resume, and it's incredible for the stage that you are in your career, what you've owned, what you've accomplished, what you've really focused on. and it's, I'm glad that you have professors and colleagues that are there to remind you of what you bring to the table, but you need to remind yourself of that as well. And I think the other point that you were talking about just about networking is that you don't like it necessarily. I think if I did a survey of people and how they felt about networking, not that many people would say that it was their favorite thing to do.
I think you're completely right with that.
And so I think one of the things that you and I had talked about is just giving yourself sort of achievable goals, right? Like, you're going to meet 3 people at this conference. You're going to ask 1 question in this meeting. So it's not, you're not trying to boil the ocean and take on a whole new, social network in one day. But if you give yourself achievable goals, that sort of step-by-step success is also really helpful.
Yeah, no, it's 100% agree with that. And one other thing I think, I'm curious if you agree with this, but one thing that I have also found helpful, I'm glad that we're now in a space where, it's no longer one sort of woman in the room. But even still, like in my current job, I'm really one of the few females that's around, and something that I found super helpful, especially I think as we at least in the near future, until we kind of get to that equal women representation in the tech in ICT, it's really important, I think, to have a group of strong, just personal, career motivated female friends. That, like, I have a few core groups that they're not all interested in tech, they're not all interested in cybersecurity or any of what I am, but when I have kind of either problems at work or things that I'm not certain about, or those different career anxieties or that come up, like those are my go-to. And I think having a strong supportive network of women around you that you can build and cultivate into friendships, I think it's really important. I'm kind of curious on your take on that.
So I agree with that, and a lot. I guess I would say that I agree with that in part. I do think that having a strong supportive network of women around you is critical, and I know that my friends who are women are invaluable emotional and professional resources for me. I will also say that there are a world of men out there who are also supportive of ensuring that there is equitable representation in the tech space, at the boardroom, at the executive level. And as important as it is to have our strong networks of women, don't discount the role of male allies. They are out there and they're important. And I think it's important to recognize that as well. I think there's so much conversation right now about how to sort of address, is it micro bias? Is that I'm not sure I've got the right term, but the sort of like unintended bias that you might see of, if this is somebody that you golf with, or if this is somebody that you go shopping with, that's the person who you're going to think of for the role. And so there's a lot more happening at I think corporate management level to ensure that those sort of natural, like, friendship allies don't become the sort of logical go-to for opportunities professionally as well. And that, I think that's incredible progress, and will, I think, start to help erode some of the imbalance that we see, or we have seen. But I think the tech space is a challenge. So the more women and girls we can get out there in that space, let's go do it.
100%. And love your point on allies. I know my current 2 mentors in this space are both male. So I definitely, you definitely don't discount, the allies out there. I know something we've done at SEPA is whenever we bring people in to talk or do panel discussions, we always want to make sure it's balanced on representation. That's a priority that, our cyber program has started to really focus on. So there's definitely people out there that are trying to help make that change. And I think this is a good time to be a woman or a girl that's trying to enter the tech space. And
I
there's
agree.
a lot, I think, that we have to offer.
There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of diversity of opportunity, and there's a lot of interest in diversity of talent. So I would agree, this is a great time.
Yeah, and just as things are happening in the world, you're going to see even more opportunity and need. So and change. I'm curious to see what this looks like in a year. that is the fun thing about the tech space. You know,
that's true. That's true. Its evolution is exponential.
Yeah. All right. Well, Carol, it's been a pleasure getting to meet with you and get to know you and to have this conversation today. I think this wraps up our session today for Talking Tech Women and Girls in ICT. Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you so much to our viewers that are watching us today.
Thanks for having me, Jen. I look forward to having you as part of my network.
Likewise, let's stay in touch.